reading the last two chapters of Out of Time's Abyss. Still have been chapter 4 and chapter 5. I'll announce that again in a bit. Hope you're all doing well if you're listening to this. And just remember, you're doing amazing. You are amazing. And you deserve to feel amazing. But that is about all I have for a bit of a starter. Let me see real quick what's going on there. Okay, alright. Just organising some stuff before I end real quick. Before I jump into things. Need to wait on the notifications to go out anyways. So we're just chatting first. So for anyone that's, I'll do a small kind of bit of a recap in a bit, I guess. But well, for anyone watching the VoD, I want you to just get straight into chapter 4. Probably skip to at least 5 minutes in. Well, there's the button noticing that I'm live though. Notifications somewhat out on time today. Well, that was 2 minutes in. Also, if I end up not editing or like cutting the VoD short when uploading it, we'll probably have some other stuff after Out of Time's Abyss. I'll have to remember that. Maybe I'll have to note down the time that I'm done with Out of Time's Abyss. I'll have to see. Maybe I'll get something ready to note the time down on that I'm done with Out of Time's Abyss in case I do want to note it down. But yeah, for any of you who may have forgotten, this is Out of Time's Abyss. This is the first book in the Caspak trilogy by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Caspak being an interesting island found by some people way out in the sea. It's not on any maps or lakes, because no one's ever been there and come back from it. Well, probably not, at least. But the island's also a bit weird. It's got a lot of dinosaurs and the like still on it. Saber-toothed tigers, mammoths, I think they've said. But also quite interesting, somewhat humans and Neanderthals and the way they go through a sort of evolution process in just their own lifetimes, apparently. Let me think real quick what we have been up to in the first 3 chapters of Out of Time's Abyss. So I remember it follows there's one guy that ended up splitting off of the fort of the first people that arrived from Caspak. And if I remember correctly, that one guy eventually, or the group he was out with, they went out to explore, and he eventually got caught by some weird, it's kind of a weird step in the evolution on that island. It's from the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals on the island evolved to be more and more human-like, but there's just one species around as well, where they evolved to have wings, maybe a bit more bird-like. And well, the guy we're mainly following got captured by one of them. So I'm kind of just waiting on a live notification in Discord. Well, taking its sweet time at least. Oh well. At least then we know that the bothers are quite relaxed today. Well, let me see, in the land of Wairu, which is the name for these more bird-like humans on this island. They kind of have their own island in this, next to the bigger islands. If I remember correctly, our main guy, he ended up killing at least one of the Wairu in there, but unnoticed he hit his body. And hello, Simple Gamer, thank you for the hydrate, for keeping me hydrated. Hope you're doing well. Just trying to come up with a bit of a recap right now, whilst I'm waiting on the Discord notification to go out. Which is taking its sweet, sweet time. I don't really want to send a message in there myself. Well, maybe I can just send a message without pinging anyone. At least I don't get a double ping, but let me just do that. But should be any time now. Let me just try and recap basically the last chapter, I think. Our main guy ended up getting captured after, causing a bit of ruckus in the land of the Wairu. He killed at least one of them, and maybe a bit more. He did have a pistol on him still, which is a bit, it's quite advanced stuff for the people on the island. They don't really have firearms, they just use bows and the likes. And let me see. He's kind of basically escaped out of the jail that he was put in. There was a bit of like a sewer system out there, which he managed to get access to from his little hole in the ground that they put him in. And that's about-ish where we are. He's a bit further with escaping, I think, but it's probably enough of a recap for right now. And let me quickly check something. Whatever. But alright, let me just get into the story. It's getting 10 minutes into the Discord bot hasn't said anything yet. Oh well. Chapter 4 of How the Time's Abyss. The further the group progressed, the more barbaric and the more sumptuous became the decorations. Hides of leopard and tiger predominated, apparently because of their more beautiful markings, and decorative skulls became more and more numerous. Many of the latter were mounted in precious metals, and set with coloured stones and priceless gems, while thick upon the hides that covered the walls were golden ornamentals, similar to those worn by the girl, and those which had filled the chests he had examined in the storeroom of Fushball Zoe, leading the Englishman to the conviction that all such spoils of war or theft, since each piece seemed made for personal adornment, while in so far as he had seen, no wire-row or ornament of any sort. And although as they advanced, more numerous became the wire-row, moving hither and thither within the temple. Many now were solid red ropes, and those that were slashed with blue, a veritable hive of murderers. At last the party halted in a room in which were many wire-rows who gathered about, Bradley questioning his captors and examining him in his apparel. One of the party accompanying the Englishman spoke to a wire-row that stood beside a door leading from the room. "Tell him who speaks for Luara," he said, "that Fushball's sway we could not find, but in returning we found this creature within the temple, hiding. It must be the same that Fushball's way captured in the Stolo country during the last darkness. Doubtless he who speaks for Luara would wish to see and question this strange thing." The creature undressed, turned and slipped through the doorway, closing the door after it, but first depositing its curved blade upon the floor without. Its pose was immediately taken by another, and Bradley now saw that at least 20 such guards loitered in the immediate vicinity. The doorkeeper was gone but for a moment, and when he returned he signified that Bradley's party was to enter the next chamber. But first each of the wire-rows removed his carved weapon and laid it upon the floor. The door was swung open and the party, now reduced to Bradley and 5 wire-rows, was ushered across the threshold into a large, irregularly shaped room. In which a single giant wire-row, whose robe was solid blue, sat upon a raised dais. "Hello, Miss. Well, sleep well. Have a great night." That is indeed kind of a shock. "Hope you're doing well." "No, I'm guessing you're doing well." "Also, there you go. There's the Discord bot as well." The creature's face was wide with the whiteness of a corpse, its dead eyes entirely expressionless, its cruel thin lips tight drawn against yellow teeth in a perpetual grimace. Upon either side of it lay an enormous curved sword, similar to those with which some of the other wire-rows had been armed, but larger and heavier. Constantly its claw-like fingers played with one or the other of these weapons. The walls of the chamber as well as the floor were entirely hidden by skins and woven fabrics. Hold on. Let me see what my cat wants. Maybe just attention, and I'll just call her up here. She just had food, so it must be attention basically. Well, alright, miss, take care. Sleep well. And who knows, maybe we'll get on a more normal sleep schedule. Well, didn't seem like she wanted to get up here, but I don't know. So whatever. The creature's face, to which Bradley now was broad, was wide with the wideness of a corpse, its dead eyes entirely expressionless, its cruel thin lips tight drawn against yellow teeth in a perpetual grimace. Upon either side of it lay an enormous, curved sword, similar to those with which some of the other Wairoos had been armed, but larger and heavier. Constantly its claw-like fingers played with one or the other of these weapons. The walls of the chamber as well as the floor were entirely hidden by skins and woven fabrics. Blue predominated in all the colorations. Fastened against the heights were many pairs of Moiru wings, mounted so that they resembled long black shields. Upon the ceiling were painted, in blue characters, a bewildering series of hieroglyphics, and upon pedestals set against the walls or standing out, well within the room, were many human skulls. As the Wairu approached, there we go. Oh, she's a bit quieter now. She's getting attention. As the Wairus approached, the finger upon the die, they leaned far forward, raising their wings above their heads, and stretching their necks as though offering them to the sharp swords of the grim and hideous creature. "O thou speakest for Luara," exclaimed one of the party. "We bring you the strange creature that Foshwell the Sohi captured, and brought thither at thy command." So this then was the godlike figure that spoke for divinity. This arch murderer was the Caspian representative of God on earth. His blue robe announced him the one, and the seeming humility of his minions the other. For a long minute he glared at Bradley. Then he began to question him, from whence he came and how, the name and description of his native country, and 100 other queries. "Are you Gosadalu?" the creature asked. Bradley replied that he was, and that all his kind were, as well as every living thing in this part of the world. "Can you tell me the secret?" asked the creature. Bradley hesitated and then, thinking to gain time, replied in the affirmative. "What is it?" demanded the Wairu, leaning far forward and exhibiting every evidence of excited interest. Bradley leaned forward and whispered, "'Tis for your ears alone. I will not divulge it to others, and then only on condition that you carry me and the girl I saw in the place at the Yellow Door, near to that of Foshwell Soy, back to her own country." The thing arose in wrath, holding one of its swords above its head. "Who are you to make terms for him who speaks for Luara?" It shrilled, "Tell me the secret or die where you stand." "And if I die now, the secret goes with me," Bradley reminded him. "Never again will you get the opportunity to question another of my kind who knows the secret. Anything to gain time, to get the rest of the Wairus from the room, that he might plan some scheme for escape, and put it into effect." The creature turned upon the leader of the party that had brought Bradley. "Is the thing with weapons?" it asked. "No," was the response. "Then go, but tell the guard to remain close by," commanded the High One. The Wairoo salaamed and withdrew, closing the door behind them. He who speaks for Luara grasped the sword nervously in his right hand. At his left side lay a second weapon. 'Twas evident that he lived in constant dread of being assassinated. The fact that he permitted none with weapons within his presence, and that he always kept two swords at his side, pointed to this. Bradley was racking his brain to find some suggestion of a plan whereby he might turn the situation to his own account. His eyes wandered past the weird figure before him. They played about the walls of the apartment, as though hoping to draw inspiration from the dead skulls and the hides and the wings, and then they came back to the face of the Wairoo god, now working in anger. "Quick," screamed the thing, "the secret." "Will you give me and the girl our freedom?" insisted Bradley. For an instant the thing hesitated, and then it grumbled. "Yes." At the same instant Bradley saw two heights upon the wall directly back at the daisy separate, and a face appear in the opening. No change of expression upon the Englishman's countenance betrayed that he had seen aught to surprise him. Though surprised he was, for the face in the aperture was that of the girl he had but just left hidden beneath the heights in another chamber. A wide and shapely arm now pushed past the face into the room, and in the hand tightly clutched was the curved blade smeared with blood. That Bradley had dropped beneath the heights at the moment he had been discovered and drawn from his concealment. "Listen then," said Bradley in a low voice to the Wairoo. "You shall know the secret of Kosadaloo as well as do I, but none others may hear it. Lean close, I will whisper it in your ear." He moved forward and stepped upon the dais. The creature raised its sword, ready to strike at the first indication of treachery, and Bradley stooped beneath the blade and put his ear close to the gruesome face. "Hello, Dylan. Thank you for keeping me hydrated. Hope you're doing well." As he put his ear close to his face, he rested his weight upon his hands, one upon either side of the Wairoo's body. His right hand upon the hilt of the spare sword, lying in the left of him who speaks for Luara. "This, then, is the secret of both life and death," he whispered, and at the same instant he grasped the Wairoo by the right wrist, and with his own right hand swung the extra blade in a sudden vicious blow against the creature's neck, before the thing could even give even a single cry of alarm. Then, without waiting an instant, Bradley leaped past the dead god and vanished behind the height that had hidden the girl. Wide-eyed and panting, the girl seized his arm. "What have you done?" she cried. "He who speaks for Luara will be avenged by Luara. Now indeed must you die. There is no escape, for even though we reach my own country, Luara can find you." "Bosh!" exclaimed Bradley, and then, "But you are going to knife him yourself." "Then I alone should have died," she replied. Bradley scratched his head. "Neither of us is going to die," he said. "At least not at the hands of any god. If we don't get out of here though, we'll die right enough. Can you find your way came back to the room where I first came upon you in the temple. I know the way, replied the girl, but I doubt if we can go back without being seen. I came hither because I only met Wairoos who knew that I am supposed now to be in the temple, but you should go elsewhere without being discovered. Bradley's ingenuity had come up against the stone wall. There seemed no possibility of escape. He looked about him. They were in a small room where lay a litter of rubbish, torn bits of cloth over eyes, pieces of fibre rope. In the centre of the room was a cylindrical shaft with an opening in its face. Bradley knew it for what it was. Here the arch-fiend dragged his victims and cast their bodies into the river at depth far below. The floor about the opening in the shaft and the sides of the shaft were clotted thick with a dry, dark brown substance that the Englishman knew had once been blood. The place had the appearance of having been a veritable shambles, an odour of decaying flesh permeated the air. The Englishman crossed to the shaft and peered into the opening. All below was dark as a pitch, but at the bottom he knew was the river. Suddenly, an inspiration and a bold scheme leaped to his mind. Turning quickly under about the room until he found what he sought, a quantity of the rope that lay strewn here and there. With a rapid finger he unsnarled the different lengths, the girl helping him, and then he tied the ends together until he had 3 ropes about 75 feet in length. He fastened these together at each end, and without a word secured one of the ends about the girl's body beneath her arms. "Don't be frightened," he said at length, as he led her toward the opening in the shaft. "I'm going to lower you to the river, and then I'm going down after you. When you are safe below, give 2 quick jerks upon the rope. If there is danger there, and you want me to draw you up into the shaft, jerk once. Don't be afraid, 'tis the only way." "I'm not afraid," replied the girl, rather haughtily, Bradley thought, and herself climbed through the aperture and hung by her hands waiting for Bradley to lower her. As rapidly as he was consistent with safety, the men paid out the rope. When it was about half out, he heard loud cries and wails suddenly arise within the room they had just quitted. The slaying of their god had been discovered by the Wairoos. A search for the slayer would begin at once. Lord, would the girl never reach the river? At last, just as he was positive that searchers were already entering the room behind him, there came 2 quick tugs at the rope. Instantly Bradley made the rest of the first strands fast about the shaft, slipped into the black tube, and began a hurried descent toward the river. An instant later he stood, waist deep. An instant later he stood, waist deep, and I still have to find where I still was at. In water beside the girl. Impulsively, she reached toward him and grasped his arm. A strange thrill ran through him at the contact, but he only cut the rope from about her body and lifted her to the little shelf at the riverside. "How can we leave here?" she asked. "By the river," he replied. "But first I must go back to the blue place of 7 skulls and get the poor devil I left there. I'll have to wait until after dark, though, that I cannot pass through the open stretch of river in the temple gardens by day. There is another way, said the girl. I have never seen it, but often I have heard them speak of it. A corridor that runs beside the river, from one end of the city to the other. Through the gardens it is below ground. If we could find an entrance to it, we could leave here at once. 'Tis not safe here, for I will search every inch of the temple and the grounds. Come, said Bradley, we'll have a look for it anyway. And so saying, he approached one of the doors that opened under the skull-paved shelf. They found the corridor easily, for it paralleled the river, separated from it only by a single wall. It took them beneath the gardens and the city, all the way through inky darkness. After they had reached the other side of the gardens, Bradley counted his steps until he had retraced as many as he had taken, coming down the stream. But though they had to grope their way along, 'twas much more rapid trip than the former. When he thought he was about opposite the point at which he had descended from the blue place of Seven Skulls, he saw and found a doorway leading out onto the river. And then, still in the blackest darkness, he lowered himself into the stream and fell up and down upon the opposite side for the little shelf and the ladder. 10 yards from where he had emerged he found them, while the girl waited upon the other side. To ascend to the secret panel was the work of but a minute. Here he paused and listened, lest a Wairu might be visiting the prison in search of him or the other inmate. But no sound came from the gloomy interior. Bradley could not but muse upon the joy of the men on the opposite side, when he should drop down to him with food and a new hope for escape. Then he opened the panel and looked into the room. The faint light from the grating above revealed a pile of racks in one corner, but a man lay beneath them. He made no response to Bradley's greet. The Englishman lowered himself to the floor of the room and approached the racks. Stooping, he lifted a corner of them. Yes, there was the man asleep. Bradley shook him. There was no response. He stooped lower and in the dim light examined on deck. Then he stood up with a sigh. A rat leaped from beneath the coverings and scurried away. Poor devil, muttered Bradley. He crossed the room to swing himself to the perch, preparatory to quitting the Blue Palace of Seven Skulls forever. Beneath the perch he paused. I'll not give him the satisfaction, he growled. Let him believe that he escaped. Let him believe that he escaped. Returning to the pile of rags. Returning to the pile of rags, he gathered the man into his arms. It was difficult work raising him to the high perch and dragging him through the small opening and thus down the ladder. But presently it was done, and Bradley had lowered the body into the river and cast it off. "Goodbye, old top," he whispered. A moment later he had rejoined the girl, and hand in hand they were following the dark corridor upstream toward the farther end of the city. She told him that the Wairus seldom frequented these lower passages, as the air there was too chill for them. But occasionally they came, and as they could see quite as well by night as by day, they would be sure to discover Bradley and the girl. If I come close enough, she said, we can see their eyes shining in the dark. They resemble those patches of light. They glow but do not blaze, like the eyes of the tiger or the lion. The man could not but know the very evident horror with which she mentioned the creatures. To him they were uncanny, but she had been used to them for almost a year, and probably all her life she had either seen or heard of them constantly. Why do you fear them so? He asked. It seems more than any ordinary fear of the harm they can do you. She tried to explain, but the nearest he could gather was that she looked upon the Wairu almost as supernatural beings. There is a legend current among my people, that once the Wairu were unlike us, only in that they possessed rudimentary wings. They lived in villages in the Galu country, and while the two peoples often warred, they held no hatred for one another. In those days each race came up from the beginning, and there was great rivalry as to which was the higher in the skill of the evolution. The Wairu developed the first Cosatalu, but they were always male, never could they reproduce women. Slowly they commenced to develop certain attributes of the mind, which they considered placed them upon a still higher level, and which gave them many advantages over us, seeing which they thought only of mental development. Their minds became like stars in the rivers, moving always in the same manner, never varying. They called this the Saat, which means doing everything the right way, or in other words, the Wairu way. If foe or friend right or wrong stood in the way of the Saat, then it must be crushed. Soon the Galu and the lesser races of men became to hate and fear them. It was then that the Wairu decided to carry the Saat into every part of the world. They were very warlike and very numerous. Although they had long since adopted the policy of slaying all those among them whose wings did not show advanced development. Also, alright, told them. She goes on talking about the Wairu for a while, so let me just put it back in the middle, otherwise I'll be very left-sided. It took ages for all this to happen. Very slowly came the different changes. But at last the Wairu had wings that they could use. But by reason of always making war upon their neighbours, they were hated by every creature at Caspak, for no one wanted their Dasat, and they were hated by every creature. And so they used their wings to fly to this island when the other races turned against them and threatened to kill them all. So cruel had they become and so bloodthirsty that they no longer had hearts that beat with love or sympathy, but their very cruelty and wickedness kept them from conquering the other races, since they were all so cruel and wicked to one another, so that no Wairu trust each other. that they might rise in power and possessions, until at last they became more powerful than the others, but it sought all his own. He gathered about him a few of the most terrible Wairoos, and among them made laws which took from all but these few Wairoos every weapon they possessed. Now that the sword has reached a high plane among them, never mind, I thought my cat was jumping off my lap. Not yet, apparently. They make many wonderful things that we cannot make. They think great thoughts, no doubt, and still dream of greatness to come. But their thoughts and their acts are regulated by ages of custom. They are all alike and they are most unhappy. As the girl talked, the two moved steadily along the dark passageway beside the river. They had advanced a considerable distance when there sounded faintly from far ahead the muffled roar of falling water, which increased in volume as they moved forward, until at last it filled the corridor with a deafening sound. Then the corridor ended in a blank wall, but in a niche to the right was a ladder leading aloft. There she went. And to the left was a door opening onto the river. Bradley tried the ladder first, and as he opened it felt a heavy spray against his face. The little shelf outside the doorway was wet and slippery. The roaring of the water tremendous. There could be but one explanation. They had reached a waterfall in the river, and if the corridor actually terminated there, their escape was effectually cut off, since it was quite evidently impossible to follow the bed of the river and ascend the falls. As the ladder was the only alternative, the two turned toward it, and the man first began the ascent, which was through a well similar to that which had led him to the upper floors of the temple. As he climbed, Bradley felt for openings in the side of the shaft, but he discovered none below 50 feet. The first he came to was ajar, letting a faint light into the well. As he paused, the girl climbed to his side, and together they looked through the crack into a low-ceiled chamber, in which were several Galu women, and an equal number of hideous little replicas of the full-grown Wairu with which Bradley was not quite familiar. He could feel the body of the girl pressed close to his tremble as her eyes rested upon the inmates in the room, and involuntarily his arm encircled their shoulders, as though to protect her from danger, which he sensed without recognizing. "Poor thing," she whispered. "This is our horrible fate, to be imprisoned here beneath the surface of the city, with their hideous offspring whom they hate, as they hate their fathers. A Wairu keeps his children thus hidden until they are full grown, lest they be murdered by their fellows. The lower rooms of the city are filled with many such as these." Several feet above was a second door beyond, which they found a small room stored with food in wooden vessels. A grated window in one wall opened above an alley, and through it they could see that they were just below the roof of the building. Darkness was coming, and at Bradley's suggestion they decided to remain in there until after dark, and then to ascend to the roof and reconnoiter. saw something come by that I had to look at. Sorry about that. Let me quickly see where I was at. Shortly after they had settled themselves, they heard something descending the ladder from above. They hoped that it would continue on down the well, and fairly held their breath as the sound approached the door to the storeroom. Their hearts sank as they heard the door open, and from between cracks in the vessels behind which they had saw yellow-slashed Wairu enter the room. Each recognized him immediately. The girl indicating the fact of her own recognition by a sudden pressure of her finger on Bradley's arm. 'Twas the Wairu of the yellow slashing, whose abode was the place of the yellow door in which Bradley had first seen the girl. The creature carried a wooden bowl which it filled with dried food from several other vessels. Then it turned and quit the room. Bradley could see through the partially open doorway that had descended the ladder. The girl told him that it was taking the food to the women and the young below, and that while it might return immediately, the chances were that it would remain for some time. We were just below the place of the yellow door, she said. 'Tis far from the edge of the city, so far that we may not hope to escape if we ascend to the roofs here. I think, replied the man, that of all the places in Nuo, this will be the easiest to escape from. Anyway, I want to return to the place of the yellow door, and get my pistol if it is there. It is still there, replied the girl. I saw it placed in a chest where he keeps the things he takes from his prisoners and victims. Good, exclaimed Bradley. Now come quickly. And the two crossed the room to the well, and ascended the ladder a short distance to its top, where they found another door that opened into a vacant room, the same in which Bradley had first met the girl. To find the pistol was a matter but a moment's search on the part of Bradley's companion, and then, at the Englishman's signal, she followed him to the yellow door. 'Twas quite dark without, as the two entered the narrow passage between two buildings. A few steps brought them undiscovered to the doorway of the storeroom, where lay the body of Fishball Soy. In the distance toward the temple, they could hear sounds of a great gathering of Wairus, the peculiar uncanny wailing rising above the dismal flapping of countless wings. Heard that a killing of him who speaks for the water, whispered the girl. Maybe I should have read ahead a bit, had the girl left first, well. Soon they will spread in all directions, searching for us. And they will find us, replied Bradley. As surely as Lua gives light by day, she replied, and when they find us they will tear us to pieces, for only the Wairus may murder, only they may practice Tazat. But I will not kill you, said Bradley. You did not slay him. 'Twill make no difference, she insisted. If they find us together, they will slay us both. But they won't find us together, announced Bradley decisively. Stay right there. You won't be any worse off than before I came, and I'll get as far I can and account for as many of the beggars as possible before they get me. Goodbye, you're a mighty decent little girl. I wish that I might have helped you. No, she cried. Do not leave me. I would rather die. I had hoped and hoped to find some way to return to my own country. I wanted to go back to Antak, who must be very lonely without me. But I know that I can never be. It is difficult to kill hope. 2 minds nearly dead do not leave me. Dill, thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs. What are you doing? Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much. I'll give you a bit bigger thanks after this conversation, sorry. Hope you don't mind. Hope you don't mind. Let me just get through this conversation and then... Oh, that's one of Sandra's emotes, isn't it? It's our life earlier today, but right, this conversation was gonna prioritize it and I didn't. Antak, Bradley repeated. You love the man called Antak. Yes, replied the girl. Antak was away hunting when the Wairu caught me. How he must have grieved for me. He also was Kasadalu, 12 moons older than I, and all our lives we have been together. Bradley remained silent. So she loved Antak. He hadn't the heart to tell her that Antak had died or how. There you go. It's kind of a good in between. Dill, thank you so much for the gifts, for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you so much. Much love to you. And if any of you happen to be lurking about, going by later, which anyone's there is, I suppose, but much love and the gifted sub to Hazard, and the lovely squirrel grippers, and Sour and Sublime, and QZT3, and Pixel Vegas. If you happen to be lurking about, give some love to Dill. At the door of Wishball Soy's storeroom, they halted to listen. No sound came from within, and gently Bradley pushed open the door. All was inky darkness as they entered, but presently their eyes became accustomed to the gloom that was partially relieved by the soft starlight without. The Englishman searched and found those things for which he had come: 2 robes, 2 pairs of lead wings, and several lengths of fibre rope. 1 pair of the wings he adjusted to the girl's shoulders by means of the rope. Then he draped the rope about her, carrying the cowl over her head. He heard her gasp of astonishment when she realized the ingenuity and boldness of his plan. Then he directed her to adjust the other pair of wings in the robe upon him. Working with strong, deft fingers, she soon had the work completed, and the 2 stepped out upon the roof. To all intent and purpose, genuine Wairus. Besides his pistol, Bradley carried the sword of the slain Wairu prophet, while the girl was armed with a small blade of the red Wairu. I was about to ask, what are you talking about, Dini? Because you have 3 badges for me already, so I almost thought you had a sub-badge already. Well, there you go, 4 badges now. I'm not used to seeing the Frankerface C badges. I usually have them off, but I have them on in there. Dell, thank you so much for gifting us up to Didi. mind is blanking for a bit. Did I already read about the, I think I did, but let me just backtrack for my own mind. Bradley was armed, carrying a sword and slaying Wairu prophets with his pistol in the other hand, while a girl was armed with a small blade at her at Wairu. Side by side they walked slowly across the roofs toward the north edge of the city, while roofs flapped above them, and several times they paused, others walking or sitting upon the roofs. From the temple still rose the sounds of commotion, or sitting upon the roofs. Wait. I'm very out of it today, it seems. Just kept to the wrong line. From the temple still rose the sounds of commotion, now pierced by occasional shrill screams. The murderers are abroad, whispered the girl. This will another become the tongue of the water. It is well for us, since it keeps them too busy to give the time for searching for us. They think that we cannot escape the city, and they know that we cannot leave the island, and so do I. And Q Felly, thank you for keeping me hydrated. And hello, I hope you are doing well. And someone wants attention again. Oh, I'm sorry. Hope that wasn't too loud. Put her back on my lap though, so she'll probably be quiet for about 10 to 15 minutes on my lap, and then she wander off again. Bradley shook his head. If there is any way, we will find it, he said. There is no way, replied the girl. Bradley made no response, and in silence they continued until the other edge of the roofs was visible before them. We're almost there, he whispered. The girl felt for his fingers and pressed them. He could feel hers trembling as he returned the pressure, nor did he relinquish her hand, and thus they came to the edge of the last roof. Here they halted and looked about them. To be seen attempting to descend to the ground below would be to betray the fact that they were not Wairus. Bradley wished that their wings were attached to their bodies by sinew and muscle rather than by ropes of fibre. A Wairu was flapping over it far overhead. Two more stood near a door a few yards distant, standing between these and one of the outer pedestals that supported one of the numerous skulls. Bradley made one end of a piece of rope fast about the pedestal and dropped the other end to the ground outside the city. Then they waited. It was an hour before the coast was entirely clear, and then a moment came when no Wairu was in sight. Now, whispered Bradley, and the girl grasped the rope and slid over the edge of the roof into the darkness below. A moment later, Bradley felt two quick pulls upon the rope and immediately followed to the girl's side. Across a narrow clearing, they made their way and into a wood beyond. All night they walked, following the river upward toward its source, and at dawn they took shelter in a thicket beside a stream. At no time they heard the cry of a carnivore, and though many startled animals fled as they approached. They were not once menaced by a wild beast. When Bradley expressed surprise at the absence of the fiercest beasts that are so numerous upon the mainland of Caprona, the girl explained the reason that is contained in one of the ancient legends. When the Wairoos first developed wings upon which they could fly, they found this island devoid of any life other than a few reptiles that live either upon land or in the water, and those only close to the coast. Requiring meat for food, the Wairoos carry to the island much animals as they wish for that purpose. They still occasionally bring them, and this, with a natural increase, keeps them provided with flesh. As it will thus, suggested Bradley. The first day remained in hiding, eating only the dried food that Bradley had brought with him from the temple storeroom. And the next night they set out again upon the river, continuing steadily on until almost dawn, when they came to low hills where the river wound through a gorge. It was little more than a rivulet now, the water clear and cold and filled with fish, similar to brook trout, though much larger. And although that hazard, sorry, that sentence was quite long. I read it earlier, but hope you're doing well, have a nice lurk. And don't forget to thank Dill for the gift sub earlier. Not wishing to leave the stream, the two waded along its bed to a spot where a gorge widened between perpendicular bluffs to a wooded acre of level land. Here they stopped, for here also the stream ended. They had reached its source, many cold springs bubbling up from the centre of a little natural amphitheatre in the hills and forming a clear and beautiful pool overshadowed by trees upon one side and bounded by a little clearing upon the other. With the coming of the sun, they saw they had stumbled upon a place where they might remain hidden from the Wairoos for a long time, and also one that they could defend against these winged creatures, since the trees would shield them from an attack from above, and also hamper the movements of the creatures should they attempt to follow them into the wood. For 3 days they rested here before trying to explore the neighbouring country. On the 4th, Bradley stated that he was going to scale the bluffs and learn what lay beyond. He told the girl that she should remain in hiding, but she refused to be left, saying that whatever fate was to be his, she intended to share it. So the wolves at last forced to permit her to come with him. Through woods at the summit of the bluff, they made their way toward the north, and had gone but a short distance when the wood ended, and before them they saw the waters of the inland sea, and dimly in the distance the covered shore. The beach lay some 200 yards from the foot of the hill on which they stood, nor was there a tree nor any other form of shelter between them and the water, as far up and down the coast as they could see. Among other plans, Bradley had thought of constructing a covered raft upon which they might drift to the mainland, but as such a contrivance would necessarily be of considerable weight, it must be built in the water of the sea, since they could not hope to move it even a short distance overland. If this wood was only at the edge of the water, he sighed, it is not, the girl reminded him, and then, let us make the best of it. We have escaped from death for a time at least. We have food and good water and peace in each other. What more could we have upon the mainland? But I thought you wanted to get back to your own country, he exclaimed. She cast her eyes upon the ground and half turned away. I do, she said, yet I am happy here. I could be a little happier there. Bradley stood in silent thought. We have food and good water and peace in each other, he repeated to himself. He turned then and looked at the girl, and it was as though in the days that they had been together, this was the first time that he had really seen her. The circumstances that had thrown them together, the dangers through which they had passed, all the weird and horrible surroundings that had formed the background of his knowledge of her had their effect. She had been but a companion of an adventure. Her self-reliance, her endurance, her loyalty had been only what one man might expect of another, and he saw that he had unconsciously assumed an attitude toward her that he might have assumed toward a man. And hello there, Caleb and Ivy. Thank you for the follow, hope you're doing well. Yet there had been a difference. He recalled now the strange sensation of elation that had thrilled him upon the occasion when the girl had pressed his hand in hers, and the depression that had followed her announcement of her love for Rendak. He took a step toward her, a fierce yearning to seize her and crush her in his arms swept over him, and then there flashed upon the screen of recollection the picture of a stately hall set amidst broad gardens and ancient trees, and of a proud old man with beetling brows, an old man who held his hat very high, and Bradley shook his head and turned away again. They went back then to their little acre, and the days came and went, and the men fashioned spear and bow and arrows, and hunted with them, that they might have meat, and he made hooks of fish bone, and caught fishes with wondrous flies of his own invention, and the girl gathered fruits and cooked the flesh and the fish, and made beds of branches and soft grasses. She cured the hides. She cured the hides of the animals he killed, and made them soft by much pounding. She made sandals for herself and for the man, and fashioned the hide after the manner of those worn by the warriors of her tribe, and made the men wear it, for his own garments were in rags. Hello there, Lavender Cat, hope you're doing well. How do you do? She was always the same, sweet and kind and helpful, but always there was about her manner and her expression just a trace of wistfulness, and often she sat and looked at the man when he did not know it, her brows puckered in thought as though she were trying to fathom and to understand him. In the face of the cliff, Bradley scooped a cave from the rotted granite of which the hill was composed, making a shelter for them against the rains. He brought wood for their cook fire, which they used only in the middle of the day, a time when there was little likelihood of Wairoos being in the air so far from their city. And then he learned to bank it with earth in such a way that the embers held until the following noon without giving off smoke. Always he was planning on reaching the mainland, and never a day passed that he did not go to the top of the hill and look out across the sea toward the dark distant line that meant for him comparative freedom and possibly reunion with his comrades. The girl always went with him, standing at his side and watching the stern expression on his face with just a tinge of sadness on her own. "You are not happy," she said once. "I should be over there with my men," he replied. "I do not know what may have happened to them." "I want you to be happy," she said quite simply, "but I should be very lonely if you went away and left me here." He put his hand on her shoulder. "I would not do that, little girl," he said gently. "If you cannot go with me, I shall not go. If either of us must go alone, it will be you." Her face lighted to a wondrous smile. "Then we shall not be separated," she said, "for I shall never leave you as long as we both live." He looked down into her face for a moment and then, "Who was on deck?" he asked. "My brother," she replied. "Why?" And then, even less than before, could he tell her. It was then that he did something he had never done before. He put his arms about her and stooping, kissed her forehead. "Until you find Nandak," he said, "I will be your brother." She drew away. "I already have a brother," she said, "and I do not want another." Man, Bradley was about to fell his shoulder. Didn't get away with it though. And for those who didn't hear before, Andak was the man Bradley happened to be locked up with for quite a bit of an earlier chapter, who happened to have died in that prison. Just of not getting enough food, I think. And alright, let me take a small breather between chapters. Which means basically no breather at all, but just a small pause in between. And the next chapter will be the last chapter in this book. The last chapter of this trilogy even. So we'll have to see what I'll be doing after that. I was thinking either some quick bedtime stories or the likes, child stories, whatever. Or maybe some Dutch poetry or some Dutch short stories. Maybe I'll just put it up to a poll once we get there. Since people have been interested in Dutch reading as well. And for most it'll just be inaudible, but if they like inaudible. Just looking about real quick. I know my cat's like right behind me, I think. But just making sure she doesn't want back up on my lap just yet. But let's get back into the book, into the reading. Chapter 5 of Out of Time's Abyss. Days became weeks, and the weeks became months, and the months followed one another in a lazy procession of hot, humid days and warm, humid nights. The fugitives saw never a white room by day, though often at night they heard the melancholy flapping of giant wings far above them. Each day was much like its predecessor. Bradley splashed about for a few minutes in the cold, pool early each morning, and after a time the girl tried it and liked it. Towards the centre it was deep enough for swimming, and so he taught her to swim. She was probably the first human being in all Caspak's long ages who had done this thing. Also, hold on, if you heard that sound, that was my cat. Okay, hold on. She went out of my room, but she wants something. I don't know what. Maybe more food. She just had some though. But let me quickly go check. Hold on. Right. I think she's just getting old. Because the second she saw the food that she didn't even finish, she went back to eating. So she probably wanted food, but forgot that she still had some. Alright. Let me just jump back into... Maybe I should restart a chapter after that. Yeah, sure, why not? Not that much. It's one paragraph earlier. The days became weeks, and the weeks became months, and the months followed one another in a lazy procession of hot, humid days and warm, humid nights. The fugitive saw never a white room by day, though often at night they heard the melancholy flapping of giant wings far above them. Each day was much like its predecessor. Bradley splashed about for a few minutes in the cold pool early each morning, and after a time the girl tried it and liked it. Toward the centre it was deep enough for swimming, and so he taught her to swim. She was probably the first human being in all of Caspak's long ages who had done this thing. And then while she prepared breakfast, the man shaved, this he never neglected. At first it was a source of wonderment for the girl, for the Galu men are beardless. When they needed meat he hunted, otherwise he busied himself in improving their shelter, making new and better weapons, perfecting his knowledge of the girl's language, and teaching her to speak and to write English. Anything that would keep them both occupied. He still sought new plans for escape, but with ever-lessening enthusiasm, since each new scheme presented some insurmountable obstacle. And then one day, as a border of a clear sky came that which blasted the peace and security of their sanctuary forever, Bradley was judged emerging from the water. After his morning plunge, when from overhead came the sound of flapping wings, glancing quickly up the men saw a wide-robed Wairu circling slowly above him. Thank you for keeping me hydrated again. That he had been discovered he could not doubt, since the creature even dropped to a lower altitude, as though to assure itself that what it saw was a man. Then it rose rapidly and winged away toward the city. For 2 days Bradley and the girl lived in a constant state of apprehension, awaiting the moment when the hunters would come for them. But nothing happened until just after dawn of the 3rd day, when the flapping of wings apprised them of the approach of Wairus. Together they went to the edge of the wood and looked up. There you go, Evan. I should try and tell you before. Together they went to the edge of the wood and looked up to see 5 red-robed creatures dropping slowly in ever-lessening spirals toward the little amphitheater. With no attempt at concealment they came, sure of their ability to overwhelm these 2 fugitives. And with the fullest measure of self-confidence, they landed in a clearing but a few yards from the man and the girl. Following a plan already discussed, Bradley and the girl retreated slowly into the woods, the Wairus advanced, calling upon them to give themselves up. But the quarry made no reply. Farther and farther into the little woods, Bradley led the hunters, permitting them to approach ever closer. Then he circled back again toward the clearing, evidently to the great delight of the Wairus, who now followed more leisurely, awaiting the moment when they should be beyond the trees and able to use their wings. They are open to the semicircular formation now, with the evident intention of cutting the 2 off from returning into the wood. Each Wairu advanced with his curved blade ready in his hand, each hideous face blank and expressionless. It was then that Bradley opened fire with his pistol, 3 shots aimed with careful deliberation, for it had been long since he had used a weapon, and he could not afford to chance wasting ammunition on misses. At each shot the Wairu dropped, and then the remaining 2 sought escape by flight, screaming and wailing after the manner of their kind. When a Wairu runs his wings spread almost without any volition upon his part, since from time immemorial he had always used them to balance himself and accelerate his running speed, so that in the open they appear to skim the surface of the ground when in the act of running. But here in the woods among the closet balls, the spreading of their wings proved their undoing. It hindered and stopped them and threw them to the ground, and then Bradley was upon them, threatening them with instant death if they did not surrender, promising them their freedom if they did his bidding. As you have seen, he cried, I can kill you when I wish and at a distance. You cannot escape me. Your only hope of life lies in obedience. Quick or I kill. The Wairu stopped and faced him. What do you want of us? Asked one. Throw aside your weapons, Bradley commanded. After a moment's hesitation they obeyed. Now approach. A great plan, the only plan, had suddenly come to him like an inspiration. The Wairus came closer and halted at his command, Bradley turned to the girl. "There is rope in the shoulder," he said. "Fetch it." She did as he bid, and then he directed her to fasten one end of a 50-foot length to the ankle of one of the Wairoos, and the opposite end to the second. The creatures gave evidence of great fear, but I dared not attempt to prevent the act. "Now go out into the clearing," said Bradley, "and remember that I'm walking close behind, and that I will shoot the nearer one should either attempt to escape. That will hold the other until I can kill him as well." In the open he ordered them. "The girl will get up on the back of the one in front," announced the Englishman. "I will mount the other. She carries a sharp blade, and I carry this weapon that you know kills easily at a distance. If you disobey in the slightest the instructions that I am about to give you, you shall both die. That we must die with you will not deter us. If you obey, I promise to set you free without harming us. You will carry us due west, depositing us upon the shore of the mainland, that is all. 'Tis the price of your life, do you agree?" Sullenly the Wairoos acquiesced. Bradley examined the knots that held the rope to their ankles, and feeling them secure, directed the girl to mount the back of the leading Wairoo, himself upon the other. Then he gave it a signal for the two to rise together. With loud flapping of the powerful wings, the creatures took to the air, circling once before they topped the trees upon the hill, and then taking a course due west out over the waters of the sea. Nowhere about them could Bradley see signs of other Wairoos, nor of those other menaces which he had feared might bring disaster to his plans for escape. The huge winged reptilia that are so numerous above the southern areas of Kaspak, and which are often seen, though in lesser numbers farther north. Nearer and nearer loomed the mainland, a broad park-like expanse, stretching inland to the foot of a low plateau spread out before them. The little dots in the foreground became grazing herds of deer and antelope and bos. A huge woolly rhinoceros wallowed in a mud hole to the right, and beyond, a mighty mammoth called the tender shoot from a tall tree. The roars and screams and growls of giant carnivora came faintly to their ears. Ah, this was Kaspak, with all of its dangers and its primal savagery. It brought a fullness to the throat of the Englishman, as to one who sees and hears the familiar sights and sounds of home after a long absence. Then the Wairoos dropped swiftly downward to the flower-starred turf that grew almost to the water's edge. The fugitives slipped through their backs, and Bradley told the red-robed creatures they were free to go. And hello there, back to the roots. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the follow. When he had cut the ropes from their ankles, they arose with an uncanny wailing upon their lips that always brought a shudder to the Englishman, and upon dismal wings they flapped away toward frightful woe. When the creatures had gone, the girl turned toward Bradley. "Why did you have them bring us here?" she asked. "Now we are far from my country, we may never live to reach it, as we are among enemies who, while not so horrible, will kill us just as surely as would the Wairoo should they capture us. And we have before us many marches through lands filled with savage beasts." "There were two reasons," replied Bradley. You told me that there are two Irish cities at the eastern end of the island. To have paused near either of them might have been to have brought about our heads hundreds of the creatures from whom we could not possibly have escaped. Again, my friends must be near the spot. It can be over 2 marches to the ford of which I have told you. It is my duty to return to them. If they still live, we shall find a way to return you to your people. And you, asked the girl. I escaped from woe, replied Bradley. I've accomplished the impossible once, and so I shall accomplish it again. I shall escape from Caspak. He was not looking at her face as he answered her, and so did he not see the shadow of sorrow that crossed her countenance. When he raised his eyes again, she was smiling. What you wish, I wish, said the girl. Southward along the coast they made their way, following the beach, where the walking was best, but always keeping close enough to trees to ensure sanctuary from the beasts and the reptiles that so often menaced them. It was late in the afternoon when the girl suddenly seized Bradley's arm and pointed straight ahead along the shore. What is that? She whispered. What strange reptile is it? Bradley looked in the direction her slim forefinger indicated. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, and then he seized her wrist and drew her quickly by the clump of bushes. What is it? She asked. It's the most frightful reptile that the water of the world have ever known, he replied. It's a German U-boat. An expression of amazement and understanding lighted her features. It is the thing of which you told me, she exclaimed. The thing that swims under the water and carries men in its belly. It is, replied Bradley. Then why do you hide from it? Asked the girl. You said now it belonged to your friends. Many months have passed since I knew what was going on among my friends, he replied. I cannot know what has befallen them. They should have been gone from here in this vessel long since, and so I cannot understand why it is still here. I am going to investigate first, before I show myself. When I left there were more Germans on the U-33 than there were men of my own party at the fort, and I have had sufficient experience of Germans to know that they will bear watching, if they have not been properly watched since I left. Making their way through a fringe of wood that grew a few wards inland, and the two crept unseen toward the U-boat, which lay moored to the shore at a point which Bradley now recognized as being near the oil pool north of Dinosaur. Dinosaur being the name of their fort. As close as possible to the vessel they halted, crouching low among the dense vegetation, and watched the boat for signs of human life about it. The hatches were closed. No one could be seen or heard. For 5 minutes Bradley watched, and then he determined to board the submarine and investigate. He had risen to carry his decision into effect when there suddenly broke upon his ear, uttered in loud and menacing tones, a volley of German oaths and expletives, among which he heard English Schweinhunde repeated several times. The voice did not come from the direction of the U-boat, but from inland. Creeping forward, Bradley reached a spot where, through the creepers hanging from the trees, he could see a party of men coming down toward the shore. He saw Baron Frederick from Scunverts and 6 of his men, all armed while marching. In a little knot among them were Olsen Brady, Sinclair, Wilson and Whiteley. Bradley knew nothing of the disappearance of Bowen Tyler and Miss LaRue, nor of the perfidy of the Germans in shelling the fort and attempting to escape in the U-33, but he was in no way surprised at what he saw before him. And thank you for keeping me hydrated, Sketch. The little party came slowly onward, the prisoner staggering beneath a few cans of oil, while Schwartz, one of the German non-commissioned officers, cursed and beat them with a stick of wood, impartially. Von Scunverts walked in the rear of the column, encouraging Schwartz and laughing at the discomfiture of the Britishers. Dietz, Heinz and Klotz also seemed to enjoy the entertainment immensely, but 2 of the men, Blessard and Hindle, marched with eyes straight to the front and with scowling faces. Bradley felt his blood boil at the sight of the cowardly indignities being heaped upon his men, and in the brief span of time occupied by the column to come abreast of where he lay hidden, he made his plans, foolhardy though he knew them. Then he drew the girl close to him. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'm going out to fight those beasts, but I shall be killed. Do not let them see you. Do not let them take you alive. They are more cruel, more cowardly, more bestial than the White Rose." The girl pressed close to him, her face very white. "Go, if that is right," she whispered. "But if you die, I shall die, for I cannot live without you." He looked sharply into her eyes. Oh, he ejaculated, "what an idiot I have been, nor could I live without you, little girl." Also, for anyone wondering, it's just another way of saying someone kind of shouted it. It's not... yeah. Good enough. Goodbye. He disengaged himself from her arms and looked again in time to see that the rear of the column had just passed him. Then he arose and leaped quickly and silently from the jungle. Oh well, you pick up some of these older words when you read books in the public domain. I'll translate or swap out some every now and then. Although not so much in this book. This book hasn't really had actually no highlighter. This book does have some things I have been avoiding, but you'll never know, since you won't hear it from me, at least not over Twitch. Suddenly, von Scunverts felt an arm thrown about his neck, and his pistol jerked from its holster. He gave a cry of fright and warning, and his men turned to see a half-naked white man holding their leader securely from behind and aiming a pistol at them over his shoulder. "Drop these guns," came in short, sharp syllables and perfect German from the lips of the newcomer. Drop them, or I'll put a bullet through the back of von Skunvert's head. The Germans hesitated for a moment, looking first toward von Skunvert and then to Schwartz, who was evidently second in command for orders. "It's the English Big Bradley," shouted the latter, "and he's alone. Go and get him." "Go yourself," growled Plesser. Hindle moved close to the side of Plesser and whispered something to him. The latter nodded. Suddenly von Skunvert's wield bowed and seized Bradley's pistol arm with both hands. "Now," he shouted, "come and take him, quick." Schwartz and 3 others leaped forward, but Plesser and Hindle held back, looking questioningly toward the English prisoners. Then Plesser spoke. "Now is your chance, Englander," he called in low tones. "Seize Hindle and me and take our guns from us. We will not fight hard." Olsen and Brady were not long in acting upon the suggestion. They had seen enough of the brutal treatment von Skunvert accorded his men, and the especially venomous attentions he had taken great enjoyment in according Plesser and Hindle to understand that these two might be sincere in the desire for revenge. In another moment the 2 Germans were unarmed, and Olsen and Brady were running to the support of Bradley, but already it seemed too late. Von Skunvert had managed to drag the Englishman around, so that his back was towards Schwartz and the other advancing Germans. Schwartz was almost upon Bradley, with gun clubbed and ready to smash down upon the Englishman's skull. Brady and Olsen were charging the Germans in the rear with Wilson, Whiteley, and Sinclair supporting them with bare fists. It seemed that Bradley was doomed when, apparently out of space, an arrow whizzed, striking Schwartz in the side, passing halfway through his body to crumple him to earth. With a shriek the man fell, and at the same time Olsen and Brady saw the slim figure of a young girl standing at the edge of the jungle, coolly fitting another arrow to her bow. Bradley had now succeeded in wresting his arm free from von Skunvert's grip and in dropping the latter with a blow from the butt of his pistol. The rest of the English and Germans were engaged in a hand-to-hand encounter, Plesser and Hindle standing aside from the melee and urging their comrades to surrender and join with the English against the tyranny of von Skunvert. Heinz and Klotz, possibly influenced by their exhortation, were putting up but a half-hearted resistance, but Dietz, a huge bearded bull-necked Prussian, yelling like a maniac, sought to exterminate the English Schweinhunde with his bayonet, fearing to fire his piece lest he kill some of his comrades. 'Twas Olsen who engaged him, and though unused to the long German rifle and bayonet, he met the bull rush of the Hun with a cold, cruel precision and science of English bayonet fighting. There was no feinting, no retiring, and no parrying that was not also an attack. Bayonet fighting today is not a pretty thing to see. It is not an artistic fencing match in which men give and take. It is slaughter inevitable and quickly over. Dietz lunged once madly at Olsen's throat, a short point with just a twist of the bayonet to the left, sent the sharp blade over the Englishman's left shoulder. Instantly he stepped close in, dropped his rifle through his hands, and grasped it with both hands close below the muzzle, and with a short, sharp jab sent his blade up beneath Dietz's chin to the brain. So quickly was the thing done, and so quick to withdraw, that Olsen had wheeled, to take on another adversary before the Germans' corps had toppled to the ground. But there were no more adversaries to take on. Heinz and Klotz had thrown down their rifles, and with hands above their heads were crying "Kamerad, Kamerad" at the tops of their voices. Von Scunvert still lay where he had fallen. Plesser and Hindle were explaining to Bradley that they were glad of the outcome of the fight, as they could no longer endure the brutality of the U-boat commander. The remainder of the men were looking at the girl, who now advanced slowly, her bow ready, when Bradley turned toward her and held out his hand. "Khotan," he said, "unstring your bow, these are my friends and yours." And to the Englishman, "This is Khotan, you who saw her save me from Swartz know a part of what I owe her." The rough men gathered about the girl, and when she spoke to them in broken English, with a smile upon her lips, enhancing the charm of her irresistible accent, each and every one of them promptly fell in love with her, and constituted himself henceforth her guardian and their slave. Okay, there, riding, calm down a bit. They're a bit thirsty there. I guess they should get some water. A moment later, the attention of each was called to Plesser by a volley of invective. They turned in time to see the man running toward von Scunvert, who was just rising from the ground. Plesser carried a rifle with bayonet fixed that he had snatched from the side of Dietz's corpse. Von Scunvert's face was livid with fear, his jaws working as though he would call for help, but no sound came from his blue lips. "You struck me," shrieked Plesser, "once, twice, 3 times. You struck me big. You murdered Schwark. You drove him insane by your cruelty, until he took his own life. You are only one of your kind. They are all like you, from the Kaiser down. I wish that you were the Kaiser, that's what I do." And he lunged his bayonet through von Scunvert's chest. Then he let his rifle fall with the dying man and wheeled toward Bradley. "Here I am," he said. "Do with me as you like. All my life I have been kicked and cuffed by such as that, and yet always have I gone out when they commanded, saying to give up my life if need to be, to keep them in power. Only lately have I come to know what a fool I have been, but now I am no longer a fool, and besides, I am avenged and Swarky is avenged, so you can kill me if you wish. Here I am." "If I was after being the king," said Olsen, "I'd pin the VC on your noble chest, but being only an Irishman with a sweet name, for which God forgive me, the best I can do is shake your hand." "You will not be punished," said Bradley. "There are 4 of you left. If you 4 want to come along and work with us, you will take you, but you will come as prisoners." "It suits me," said Plesser. "Now that the Captain Lieutenant is dead, you need not fear us. All our lives we have done nothing but to obey his claws. If I had not killed him, I suppose, I would be fool enough to obey him again, but he is dead. Now I will obey you. We must obey someone." "And you," Bradley turned to the other survivor of the original crew of the U-33. Each promised obedience. The 2 red Germans were buried in single graves, and then the party boarded the submarine and stowed away the oil. Here Bradley told the men what had befallen him, since the night of September 14th, when he had disappeared so mysteriously from the camp upon the plateau. Now he learned for the first time that Bowen J. Tyler Jr. and Miss LaRue had been missing even longer than he, and that no faintest trace of them had been discovered. Olsen told him of how the Germans had returned and waited in ambush for them outside the fort, capturing them that they might be used to assist in the work of refining the oil and later in manning the U-33, and Platter told briefly of the experiences of the German crew under von Scunverts since they had escaped from Gaspach months before, of how they lost their bearings after having been shelled by ships they had attempted to sneak farther north, and how at last, with provisions gone and fuel almost exhausted, they had sought and at last found, more by accident than design, the mysterious islands they had once been so glad to leave behind. Now, announced Bradley, well planned for the future, the boat has fuel provisions and water for a month. I believe you said, Platter. There are 10 of us to man it. We have a law, said Judy here. We must search for Miss LaRue and Mr. Tyler. I say, said Judy, because we know that we shall not find them. But it is none the less our duty to comb the shoreline, firing signal shells at intervals, that we at least may leave at last, with full knowledge that we have done all that man might do to locate them. None dissented from this conviction, nor was there a voice raised in protest against the plan to at least make assurance doubly sure before quitting Gaspach forever. And so they started, cruising slowly up the coast and firing an occasional shot from the gun. Often the vessel was brought to a stop, and always there were anxious eyes scanning the shore for an answering signal. Late in the afternoon they caught sight of a number of Bantu warriors, but when the vessel approached the shore and the natives realized that the human beings stood upon the back of the strange monsters of the sea, they fled in terror before Bradley could come within hailing distance. And hello there, Oliver Pentland. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're doing well. That night they dropped anchor at the mouth of a sluggish stream whose warm water swarmed with millions of tiny tadpole-like organisms, minute human spawn, starting on their precarious journey from some inland pool toward the beginning. A journey which 1 in millions perhaps might survive to complete. Already almost the inception of life, they were being greeted by thousands of voracious mouths, as fish and reptiles of many kinds fought to devour them. The wild water and larger creatures pursued the devourers to be, in turn, preyed upon by some other of the countless forms that inhabit the deeps of Caprona's frightful sea. The second day was practically a repetition of the first. They moved very slowly with frequent stops, and once they landed in the Krolu country to hunt. Here they were attacked by the bow and arrow men, whom they could not persuade to palaver with them. So belligerent were the natives that it became necessary to fire into them in order to escape their persistent and ferocious attentions. What charms, asked Bradley, as they were returning to the boat with their game, could Tyler and Miss LaRue have had among such as these? But they continued on their fruitless quest, and the third day, after cruising along the shore of a deep inlet, They passed a line of lofty cliffs that formed the southern shore of the inlet, and rounded a sharp promontory about noon. Coton and Bradley were on deck alone, and as the new shoreline appeared beyond the point, the girl gave an exclamation of joy and seized the man's hand in hers. And hello there, Brouwer Awesome. Thank you for the follow up. You're doing well. Oh, look, she cried. The Galu country, the Galu country. 'Tis my country that I never thought to see again. You're glad to come again, Coton? Asked Bradley. Oh, so glad, she cried. Wrong way, hold on. Oh, so glad, she cried. And you will come with me to my people. We may live here among them, and you will be a great warrior. Oh, when Jor dies, you may even be chief, for there is none so mighty as my warrior. You will come. Bradley shook his head. I cannot, little Coton, he answered. My country needs me, and I must go back. Maybe someday I shall return. You will not forget me, Coton. She looked at him in wide-eyed wonder. You are going away from me? She asked in a very small voice. You're going away from Coton. Bradley looked down upon the little bowed head. He felt the soft cheek against his bare arm, and he felt something else there too, hot drops of moisture that ran down to his very fingertips and splashed, but each one wrung from a woman's heart. He bent low and raised the tear-stained face to his own. No, Coton, he said, I'm not going away from you, for you are going with me. You are going back to my own country to be my wife. Tell me that you will, Coton. And he bent still lower yet from his height, and kissed her lips, nor did he need more than the wonderful new light in her eyes to tell him that she would go to the end of the world with him, if he would but take her. And then the gun crew came up from below again to fire a signal shot, and the two were brought down from the high heaven of their new happiness to the scarred and weather-beaten deck of the U-33. An hour later the vessel was running close in by a shore of wondrous beauty beside a park-like meadow that stretched back a mile inland to the foot of a plateau, when Whiteley caught attention to a score of figures clambering downward from the elevation to the lowland below. And hello there, Godly G. Thank you for the follow-up. You're doing well. The engines were first, and the boat brought to a stop, while all hands gathered on deck to watch the little party coming toward them across the meadow. They are Galus, cried Coton. They are my own people. Let me speak to them, lest they think we come to fight them. Put me ashore, my men, and I will go meet them. The nose of the U-boat was run close into the steep bank, but when Coton would have run forward alone, Bradley seized her hand and held her back. I will go with you, Coton, he said, and together they advanced to meet the oncoming party. They were about 20 warriors moving forward in a thin line, as our infantry advanced as skirmishers. Bradley could not but notice the marked difference between this formation and the mob-like methods of the lower tribes he had come in contact with, and he commented on it to Coton. Galu warriors always advance into battle thus, she said. The lesser people remain in a huddled group where they can scarce use their weapons, the while they present so big a mark to us that our spears and arrows cannot miss them. But when they hold theirs at our warriors, If they miss the first man, there is no chance that they will kill someone behind them. Stand still now, she cautioned, and fold your arms. They will not harm us then. Bradley did as he was bid, and the two stood with arms forward as the line of warriors approached. When they had come within some 50 yards, they halted and one spoke. "Who are you and from whence do you come?" he asked, and then Khotan gave a little glad cry and sprang forward with outstretched arms. "Oh, Tun," she exclaimed, "do you not know your little Khotan?" The warrior stared incredulous for a moment, and then he too ran forward, and when they met took the girl in his arms. It was then that Bradley experienced to the full a sensation that was new to him, a sudden hatred for the strange warrior before him, and a desire to kill without knowing why he would kill. He moved quickly to the girl's side and grasped her wrist. "Who is this man?" he demanded in cold tones. Khotan turned a surprised face toward the Englishman, and then of a sudden broke forth into a merry peal of laughter. "This is my father, Bradley," she cried. "And who is Bradley?" demanded the warrior. Oh wait, maybe I read that a bit wrong. There's a comma between "this is my father, Bradley." So he was telling Bradley that that's her father. Yeah. I was like, hold on. Her father is named Bradley, close to Bradley, the main character. But yeah, I was being dumb there. Sorry about that. "And who is Bradley?" demanded the warrior. "He is my man," replied Khotan simply. "By what right?" insisted Tun. And then she told him briefly of all that she had passed through since the Wairoos had stolen her, and of how Bradley had rescued her and sought to rescue Antak, her brother. "You are satisfied with him?" asked Tun. "Yes," replied the girl proudly. It was then that Bradley's attention was attracted to the edge of the plateau by a movement there, and looking closely he saw a horse bearing two figures sliding down a steep declivity. Once at the bottom the animal came charging across the meadowland at a rapid run. It was a magnificent animal, a great bay stallion with a white blazed face and the white forelegs to the knees, its barrel encircled by a broad circle of white. And as it came to a sudden stop beside Tun, the Englishman saw that it bore a man and a girl, a tall man and a girl, as beautiful as Khotan. When the girl espied the latter, she slid from the horse and ran toward her, fairly screaming for joy. The man dismounted and stood beside Tun. Like Bradley, he was garbed after the fashion of the surrounding warriors, but there was a subtle difference between him and his companion. Possibly he detected a similar difference in Bradley, for his question was, "From what country?" And though he spoke in Galu, Bradley thought he detected an accent. And thank you, Hazard. I'm sorry. I read it in between, and I don't really blush, but if I were to be capable of blushing, then maybe I am. And so what if I am? Try another insult after 10 minutes. And thank you for the follow, by the way, Yaseka. Hope you're doing well. "England," replied Bradley to where he was from. A broad smile lighted the newcomer's face as he held out his hand. "I am Tom Billings of Santa Monica, California," he said. "I know all about you, and I'm mighty glad to find you alive." "How did you get here?" asked Bradley. "I thought ours was the only party of men from the outer world ever to enter Caprona." Fair, it isn't an insult anyway. I feel like I might have hoped it would be taken as one. Hard to try and insult someone with their reality though. And a little Isaac Penis, thank you for the follow. Yes, it was the only search party for now, until we came in search of Bowen J. Tyler Jr., replied Billings. "We found him and sent him home with his bride, but I was kept a prisoner here." Bradley's face darkened. Then they were not among friends after all. "There are 10 of us down there on the German sub, with small arms and a gun," he said quickly in English. "It will be no trick to get away from these people." "You don't know my jailer," replied Billings, "or I'd not be so sure. Wait, I'll introduce you." And then turning to the girl that accompanied him, he called her by name. "Adjure," he said. "Permit me to introduce Lieutenant Bradley. Lieutenant, Mrs. Billings, my jailer." The Englishman laughed. Where was I? The Englishman laughed as he shook hands with the girl. "You're not as good a soldier as I," he said to Billings. "Instead of being taken prisoner myself, I have taken one. Mrs. Bradley, this is Mr. Billings." Adjure, quick to understand, turned toward Khotan. "You're going back with him to his country?" she asked. Khotan admitted it. "You dare?" asked Adjure. "But your father will not permit it. Adjure, my father, High Chief of the Gallows, will not permit it. For like me, you are Kosada Law. Oh, Khotan, if we but could. How I would love to see all the strange and wonderful things of which my Tom tells me." Bradley bent and whispered in her ear, "Say the word and you may both go with us." Billings heard and speaking in English asked Adjure if she would go. "Yes," she answered, "if you wish it, but you know, my Tom, that if Jor captures us, both you and Khotan's men will pay the penalty with your lives. Not even his love for me nor his admiration for you can save you." Bradley noticed that she spoke in English, broken English like Khotan's, but equally appealing. "We can easily get you aboard the ship," he said, "on some pretext or other, and then we can steam away. They can neither harm nor detain us. Nor will we have to fire a shot at them." "Hello, Daniel, and I don't really listen to my own ASMR. Most ASMR artists don't. Since I mean, just as with in general, it's kind of weird hearing your own voice back. But I mean, I do enjoy a lot of ASMR. And I do quality check it every now and then. And so it was done, Bradley and Khotan taking Adjure and Billings aboard to show them the vessel, which almost immediately raised anchor and moved slowly out into the sea. "I hate to do it," said Billings. "They have been fine to me, Jordan Thunder splendid men, and they will think me an ingrate, but I can't waste my life here, for there is so much to be done in the outer world. As they steamed down the inland sea past the inlet of Woe, the story of their adventures were told, and Bradley learned that Bowen Tyler and his bride had left the Galway country but a fortnight before, and there was every reason to believe that the Toreador might still be lying in the Pacific not far off the subterranean mouth of the river, which emitted Caprona's heated waters into the ocean. Late in the second day, after running through swarms of hideous reptiles, they submerged at the point where the river entered beneath the cliffs, and shortly after rose to the sunlit surface of the Pacific. But nowhere, as far as they could see, was sign of another craft. Down the coast they steamed toward the beach, where Billings had made his crossing in the hydro-aeroplane, and just at dusk the lookout announced a light dead ahead. It proved to be aboard the Toreador, and a half-hour later there was such a reunion on the deck of the trim little yacht as no one there had ever dreamed might be possible. Of the allies there were only Tippett and James to be mourned, and no one mourned any of the Germans' death, nor Benson the trader, whose ugly story was first told in Bowen Tyler's manuscript. Tyler and the rescue party had but just reached the yacht that afternoon. They had heard faintly the signal shots fired by the U-33, but had been unable to locate their reaction, and so had assumed that they had come from the guns of the Toreador. It was a happy party that sailed north towards sunny Southern California, the old U-33 trailing in the wake of the Toreador and flying with the ladder of the glorious stars and stripes beneath which he had been born in a shipyard at Santa Monica. 3 newly married couples, their bonds now duly solemnized by the master of the ship, joyed in the peace and security of the undrugged waters of the South Pacific, and the unique honeymoon which, had it not been for stern duty ahead, they could have wished protracted till the end of time. Hello there, Abrakunu. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're doing well. And so they came one day to dock at the shipyard which Bowen and Tyler now controlled, and here the U-33 still lies, while those who pass so many eventful days within and because of her have gone their various ways. And that is the end of Out of Time's Abyss. I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me just quickly note down the stream uptime. And then I'll be able to cut it later where I want to. And let me just quickly do that real quick. Sorry, had to get that done. And there goes that. And let me see, let me throw up a poll, I think. What I could do. If anyone has any suggestions, let me know on that as well. Because what I could do is either read some fairy tales or maybe some short stories in Dutch for the rest of the stream. So if you have any suggestions to add to that poll, let me know. Just leave it at those two then. Let me start the poll and take a little break whilst that poll runs. See you all in a bit. And Skittles, thank you for the follow, hope you're doing well. Much love to you. And right, I'll be back in a sec. Yeah, Pomidorish, how are you doing? Sorry, I was on a quick break. Also, low poll, but short, or just some fairy tales it is. So let me look that up. Let me see, got a whole page of stuff that's in the public domain. picking out some good ones then, real quick. Those are two I haven't done, and they're classics, so why not, right? So let me just jump into Little Red Riding Hood. It's quite a classic, and I hadn't read it yet. I don't think I've read the Brothers Grimm, their version of it either. That might be interesting as well. Sometime. Let me maybe just change the stream title. Gotta start out with Once Upon a Time, but of course. Once upon a time, there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother. And there was nothing that she would not have given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else. So she was called Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother, she is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly, and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say good morning, and don't peep into every corner before you do it." And so, as rebellious little teens do, Little Red Riding Hood went out into the forest, drank the bottle of wine on her own. Wait, no, that's wrong version. "I will take great care," said Little Red Riding Hood to her mother, and gave her a hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Red Riding Hood entered the wood, a wolf met her. Little Red Riding Hood did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," said he. "Oh, well, thank you kindly, wolf. Whither away so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "To me grandma's." "And what have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger." "And where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "A good quarter of a league farther on in the woods. Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below." "You surely must know it," replied Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature with a nice plump mouthful. She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Red Riding Hood, and then he said, "See, Little Red Riding Hood, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look around? I believe too that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Riding Hood raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay. That would please her too. 'Tis so early in the day that I shall still gather in good time. And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the woods. Meanwhile the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house, and knocked at the door. Hold on. Who's there? Good setup to a joke. Little Red Riding Hood, replied the wolf. She's bringing cake and wine. Open the door. Lift the latch, caught out the grandma. I'm too weak and cannot get up. Stop being lazy and yet jolly. Wait, no, that's not it. The wolf lifted the latch. The door sprang open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid here in bed, and drew the curtains. Little Red Riding Hood, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother, and set out on the way to her. She was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer, so she went to the bed, drew back the curtains, and there lay her grandmother with her cap pulled far over her face, and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what large hands you have." "The better to hug you with." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with." And scarcely had the wolf said this, than with one bound he was out of bed, and swallowed up Little Red Riding Hood. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house, and thought to himself, "How the old woman is snoring. I must just see if she wants anything." So he went into the room, and when he came to the bed he saw that the wolf was lying in it. "Do I find you here, you old sinner?" said he. "I have long sought you." Then just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved, so he did not fire but took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. When he had made 2 snips, he saw the Little Red Riding Hood shining, and then he made 2 snips more, and the little girl sprang out, crying, "Ah, how frightened I have been, how dark it was inside the wolf." And after that the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Little Red Riding Hood, however, quickly fetched great stones with which they filled the wolf's belly, and when he awoke he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed at once and fell dead. Right, I kind of slightly forgot that in general this story is a bit... kind of makes me wonder what the Grimm's brothers, their version of it is. Then all three were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Little Red Riding Hood had brought, and they revived, but Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never be myself, leave the path to run into the wood, when my mother has forbidden me to do so." It is also related that once when Little Red Riding Hood was again taking cakes for the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Little Red Riding Hood, however, was on her guard, and went straight forward on her way, and told her grandmother that she had met a wolf, and that he said good morning to her, with such a wicked look in his eyes, that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her up. "Well," said the grandmother, "we will shut the door that he may not come in." Soon afterwards the wolf knocked and cried, "Open the door, grandmother. I am Little Red Riding Hood, and am bringing you some cakes." But I did not speak or open the door, so the greybeard stole twice or thrice around the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until Little Red Riding Hood went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone throw, so she said to the child, "Take the pill." Little Red Riding Hood, "I made some sausages yesterday, so carry the water in which I boiled them to the throw." Little Red Riding Hood carried until the great throw was quite full. Then the smell of the sausages reached the wolf, and he sniffed and peeped down, and at last stretched out his neck, so far that he could no longer keep his footing, and began to slip, and slipped down from the roof straight into the great throw, and was drowned. But Little Red Riding Hood went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again. And that was the tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Hello, by the way, Ducky. Hope you're doing well, although seeing that predicament of yours, probably not. Let me see real quick what fairy tale to follow this up with. I think Jack and the Beanstalk would do good. Probably. That's quite a good tale, isn't it? Alright. Jack and the Beanstalk it is. It's a pretty short one as well, I think. I mean, they're all short, basically. I don't know, Jonathan. Lack of intelligence, lack of age, lack of maturity, who knows, lack of attention. Can be all lot of things. Let them be, and maybe they'll grow wiser someday. Maybe. You never know for sure. Once upon a time, there lived a poor widow and their son Jack. One day, Jack's mother told him to sell their only cow. Jack went to the market, and on the way he met a man who wanted to buy his cow. Jack asked, "What will you give me in return for my cow?" The man answered, "I will give you 5 magic beans." Jack took the magic beans and gave the man the cow, but when he reached home, Jack's mother was very angry. She said, "You fool, he took your cow, and he gave you some beans. He threw the beans out of the window. Jack was very sad and went to sleep without dinner. The next day, when Jack woke up in the morning and looked out of the window, he saw that a huge beanstalk had grown from his magic beans. He climbed up the beanstalk and reached a kingdom in the sky. There lived a giant and his wife. Jack went inside the house and found the giant's wife in the kitchen. Jack said, "Will you please give me something to eat? I am so hungry." The kind giant's wife gave him some bread and some milk. While he was eating, the giant came home. The giant was very big and looked fearsome. Jack was very terrified and went and hid inside. The giant cried, "Fee, fee, foo, foom. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." The wife said, "There is no boy in there." So the giant ate his food and then went to his room. He took out a sack of gold coins, counted them and kept them aside. Then he went to sleep. In the night Jack crept out of his hiding place, took one sack of gold coins, and climbed down the beanstalk. At home he gave the coins to his mother. His mother was very happy, and they lived well for some time. Climbed the beanstalk and went to the giant's house again. Once again Jack asked the giant's wife for food. But while he was eating, the giant returned. Jack leaped up in fright and went and hid under the bed. The giant cried, "Fee, foo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be alive or be dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." The wife said, "There is no boy in there." The giant ate his food and went to his room. There he took out a hen. He shouted, "Lay," and the hen lay in a golden egg. When the giant fell asleep, Jack took the hen and climbed down the beanstalk. Jack's mother was very happy with him. After some days, Jack once again climbed the beanstalk and went to the giant's castle. For the third time, Jack met the giant's wife and asked for some food. Once again, the giant's wife gave him bread and milk. But while Jack was eating, the giant came home. "Fee, foo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be alive or be dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread," cried the giant. "Don't be silly. There is no boy in there," said his wife. "Hello there, the guy there. Well, all that works as well. Just come in. I do ask people to keep it English only, but let's be honest, basically everyone knows all that, right?" The giant had a magical harp that could play beautiful songs. While the giant slept, Jack took the harp and was about to leave. Suddenly the magic harp cried, "Help, master, a boy is stealing me." The giant woke up and saw Jack with the harp. Furious, he ran after Jack, but Jack was too fast for him. He ran down the beanstalk and reached home. The giant followed him. Jack quickly ran inside his house and fetched an axe. He began to chop the beanstalk. The giant fell and died. Jack and his mother were now very rich, and they lived happily ever after. And the giant is dead, but Jack lived happily ever after. That's what counted. Don't look too much into it. It's a children's story, anyways. Let's see. I think maybe do one more, a short one. Let's see. Well, maybe a bit long, but you know what? This one's nice and short. I'm sure we all know it, but let me just do it to finish the day on off, and then look for someone to rate. The hare was making fun of the tortoise one day for being so slow. "Do you ever get anywhere?" he asked with a mocking laugh. "Yes," replied the tortoise, "and I get there sooner than you think. I'll run you a race and prove it." The hare was much amused at the idea of running a race with a tortoise, but for the fun of the thing he agreed. So the fox, who had consented to act as judge, marked the distance and started the runners off. The hare was soon far out of sight, and to make the tortoise feel very deeply how ridiculous it was for him to try a race with a hare, he lay down beside the course to take a nap until the tortoise should catch up. The tortoise, meanwhile, kept going slowly but steadily, and after a time passed the place where the hare was sleeping. But the hare slept on very peacefully, and when at last he did wake up, the tortoise was near the goal. The hare now ran swiftest, but he could not overtake the tortoise in time. Slow and steady wins the race. And alright, that'll be all for today from me. I've got some other things to do, and I'm just gonna go chill later on in the evening, since I have quite a bit planned this weekend for as streaming goes. So if you want, you can catch me again in the weekend. But for today, I'm probably just gonna chill to get some energy for that happening. So let me start our raid. And I'll just go raid Fox and the raid. I don't know how much longer he'll be live, to be very honest, because he has been live a decent bit, I think. I saw him say he was going live quite a bit before I started, but I think he went live while I was live. Yeah, he did. Yeah, well, he'll probably go for a little while longer at the very least, so here's the Rachel on over there. Hope you will enjoy his lovely ASMR. I'm not sure, I should probably do this more, but I didn't really check the volume levels compared to my stream. It's usually kinda low for me, but then again so was my stream, for as I've heard it, so the volume might work out well. If not, you may have to adjust your volume, sorry about that if you do have that. And thank you all for having been here. Take care, and enjoy the rest of your days and weeks, and see you all later.